Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here to learn about Climate Ready Trees and this program that we did in Albuquerque a couple years ago. A great group of people came together, and this project, in my 8 years in my position as the state horticulture specialist for Extension, this project has been my favorite one, and it's the one I like to talk about the most. So thank you for allowing me to share it. So yes, as Amos mentioned, so I'm based in Los Lunas, so I'm not in Albuquerque, but I still subscribe to the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority newsletters and 505 Outside, and I work a lot in Albuquerque too. And yeah, I serve all over the state. I don't just focus on trees, although trees are my main focus. I also do a lot with tomatoes each year. I help people with problems with their tulip bulbs or their squash or houseplants, all kinds of fun things. And a lot of it is diagnosing problems all over the state. So that's how I've learned what to look out for in problem trees, and not just problem trees, but also how we're not caring for them correctly. So I'd like to share some of the stuff I've learned. All right, let's start out with this beautiful collage. Each of these peach flowers represents a different variety of peaches grown here at the Los Lunas Ag Science Center. It's like a research farm. It's a New Mexico State University research farm. And each of these flowers is representing a different first bloom date, right? So the biggest problem with our peaches, and some of our other fruits too, is that they bloom early and then we lose them to a late frost a lot of the time. At the time I created this collage of flower photos in April 2022, April 1st, from 18 peach varieties grown here, 3 of these varieties that are the ones in black, they had not yet bloomed as of April 1st. These 3 late bloomers were also among the last to flower in 2021 and 2020. And so these images are over 3 years old, but this year, the importance of the bloom dates really struck home. We had our last hard frost on April 20th, which knocked out most of our peach flowers, and a near frost on May 20th that may have done some damage as well. And sure enough, we had a very low yield peach year. Some years are better than others, but the late bloomers really had their time to shine this year. So these 3 varieties, I'm not necessarily recommending them for everybody. I'm just pointing out that these ones that bloomed late in 2021 or 2022 also are the ones that we are enjoying the peaches from this year. So they have had more fruit on them than any of the others. And so thinking about our frost dates and this phenological timeline of what the plants need is important for us all, and fun. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is this Climate Ready Trees report. So here I have a QR code. You can take a picture of your screen, or you can take a screenshot, and then when you go to your photos, you can access it. You can also Google it and find it. And also, I think next week there'll be a updated list of resources and kind of a summary of this today's webinar, and so we'll include these lists in that. But this is the big project that I want to talk about. All right, so we'll call it Climate Ready Trees for Albuquerque's Community Forest. And I was first introduced to this by Sarah Hurteau. She was then with the Nature Conservancy, and now as a principal ecologist at Integrated Biological Solutions. She had learned about Climate Ready Trees programs in California and decided to try to get funding to have this report made in Albuquerque. So she brought together a bunch of people, and I'll tell you more about the project. But first, I'd like to read this alarming and hopefully empowering summary of our overarching message. This is from one of my columns. I used to write a weekly gardening column, and so this is from when this report was first released in 2020. And I updated it. So in the next 25 years, because that was 5 years ago, high temperatures in the Albuquerque, oh, here we go. Now you can read it. High temperatures in the Albuquerque area are expected to resemble the current high temperatures in Las Cruces or El Paso. And in 75 years, by 2100, closer to the highs currently experienced in Tucson. For perennial plants to live and thrive as long as possible, we need to consider how cold hardy they are in our area now and how heat hardy they will be in warmer decades to come. That's the overarching message. These are some of the collaborators that Sarah Hurteau gathered together in order to do this project. Notice that there are representatives here from several public entities that got to be involved, and I was very honored to be one of them, as well as nonprofits, collaborators, and they included local landscape professionals, tree growers, nursery managers, basically about a dozen local urban forest experts. And part of our goal was to connect the dots so that people selecting, buying, and planting trees here are, oh, excuse me, I just lost myself. I got a little nervous. Let me drink a sip of water. All right, here we go. So partly that we wanted to, oh goodness, I'm sorry. We wanted people to know about specific tree species that are recommended by local experts, but also to connect with tree growers, wholesale and retail plant nurseries, municipal planners, schools, parks, groundskeepers, HOAs, and more broadly, we wanted to connect all who participate in the green industry somehow, which is all of us. So really briefly, I'll go through some of the criteria for scoring for this project. Of course, we looked at soil type tolerance and drought tolerance and heat tolerance in the next 25 years, closer to that El Paso climate, and in the end of the century, closer to Tucson's, and also cold tolerance. That's important. So we needed to look at the Albuquerque cold tolerance now, and then when we're thinking about the future, maybe we can start thinking about El Paso's cold hardiness too. This wasn't just the only criteria, though. We also looked at all these extra bonus columns. So flooding tolerance, urban compaction tolerance, alkaline soil tolerance, that's a big one, well-drained soil requirement, pests, allergens, management requirements like pruning, tree litter, and other problems that people might have, including branch attachment strength, prone to breakage. So we really were trying to make these lists useful for a broad spectrum of different people. Also edible parts, attractiveness, and that they support wildlife. So in the beginning, considering all of these factors brought up a concern. What if our team did all of this work assessing over 150 species and the result boiled down to just a few or only one? But luckily, the results were exciting and there was a lot more options. So here again is that QR code. This is the first page of this 46-page report. And there's a whole essay in the beginning and description of the project. I think it's very good. And then it goes into the tree lists. Oh, there's a link to it. So it ended up that we came up with these location types. And so each list is demonstrated here. I'll just go through them quickly. So there's large and small green stormwater infrastructure. There's a list for each of those. Think of those as your flood control areas that can be inundated with water and possibly likely pollutants. Then we also have the xeriscaped public recreation, residential or commercial places. This is what represents hopefully your yard, and this is where most of the people that I work with fall in this type 3 xeriscaped areas. Type 4 is this public recreation, residential or commercial places. And for those, think of golf courses, neighborhood parks, things like that. We also have a list for streetscapes with average growing area locations. Those, think about like medians and parkways next to a building. You know, you might have the road and your driveway and the building. And so if there's restricted rooting space there, then you need to be selecting a smaller tree. And of course, there's some areas that are very restricted. Think of sidewalk patches and the little islands in parking lots, things like that. So these are different location types. And of course, there's the fruit tree. We had to put some fruit trees in there for the fun of it too. Here is the page 16, and this is that location type that I really want to focus on, the xeriscaped areas. But you can't see that because it's so small print, and I want to grab your attention right now because I know you want to see this list, and people are, always chomping at the bit to see this list, but I have some very serious warnings about lists. These are our concerns. So at the start of the project, we're worried about how people are going to interpret these lists. So we may be creating or exacerbating a problem by creating these lists of recommended trees. Lists can sometimes create a sense of finality, but this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, we already need to update our report, and we want to include more species and perhaps remove some of them from the list in the future. This type of report has to be changeable, adaptable in our changing climate. Also, people think that the options are limited to what's on the list and then overlook other possibilities that might be even more viable and more sustainable. So please don't feel confined by the lists. Lists can oversimplify or make people feel like they have to stick to the exact recommendations. Man, this is a big one. Diversity is key. This is key for healthy ecosystems everywhere, and perhaps even more so for our harsh urban landscapes. These lists are not exhaustive. So while these lists are helpful, there are other great plants out there. They do not reflect the beauty or the importance of shorter-lived plants or other important plant forms like shrubs. I have tried, but this hashtag shrub love is not really taking off like I had hoped, but maybe we need to make a new list just for shrubs, climate ready shrubs. All you need is shrub. Yeah, I think that'll be a fun one. But also, we wanted to worry about the promise that these trees are going to thrive in all settings. That's not true. They're not going to thrive under all types of care. And plus, there are lots of different microclimates in the Albuquerque area, and even in one of any of our yards, there are lots of microclimates. Yeah. And then plant availability. So not all of the recommended plants are easy to find. We recognize that. And we need to patiently, as consumers, we need to patiently encourage growers and nurseries to focus more on climate-ready species. This process takes time, but it seems like it's working. So occasionally I put a slide in just as a reminder to take a sip, and you can look at this beautiful shrub. This is the serviceberry. It's my favorite fruit, and maybe you could prune it like a tree. All right, let's get to the lists. So I'm going to zoom in and zoom in a little more. So which of the trees on this list, I hope that you're reading through them and recognizing maybe trees already around you, maybe trees that you have not considered, or trees that you've had a hard time with. I will highlight some of my favorites and ones that I was excited to see. The Texas madrone, netleaf hackberry, all of these red buds. That was exciting to see. I have an Oklahoma red bud in my yard, but they are all beautiful, slightly different colors. Of course, desert willow. What a relief that desert willow is on this list for Albuquerque, because we have a lot of those and we're recommending those. A lot of these trees are very commonly planted, and so that's a good thing. I'm also excited about New Mexico olive, or also called the privet, because we grow that from down in El Paso and all the way up north of Santa Fe, or actually the whole state. Osage orange is one that I was excited to have on the list. And if you don't know it, then maybe you should learn about it and get excited too. When I was in graduate school in Las Cruces, I walked past a row of Osage orange trees on my way to campus, and I really appreciated their shade. And it was hot there, and this sidewalk was very, very hot. And so in the spots that there was the Osage orange, there was a little bit of shade, so I'd kind of like walk fast to the shade and then calm down a little bit. So I really love these Osage oranges. Here's more of this list when we zoom in. And so look at these trees and see what you think. Are you noticing some that are confusing? Maybe you're noticing these asterisks. So for example, with Palo Verde there at the top, the asterisk means that there is more information in the appendix of the final report. So that 46-page report includes an appendix that goes over each of the species and has some caveats. So for example, Palo Verde is not necessarily cold hardy depending on where you are. And so that is one reason for an asterisk. There's others. Yeah, so I was happy to see Afghan pine and Chinese pistache, woohoo, and the mesquites. And I love chinkapin oak, but I love all the oaks, so that's very exciting to see all of these oaks show up on your list. One of the other ones that is important to me is Texas mountain laurel, and this one was one of my dad's favorite plants, and so I just love it too. Okay, so we created this report and people can use it and that's wonderful, but it has also had this ripple effects. So thank you to the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority for adopting and for participating in the report, but also establishing some of these programs to really help incentivize selecting these trees that we've all agreed are good choices. So an example of that here is we have this 25% rebate on your water bill when you plant specific trees. And maybe next week when we share resources, we'll have links to find out more about that if you're interested. Okay, here's another little drink break. Thanks. Another way that this whole report has rippled and is exciting is that State Forestry has taken it on. So our New Mexico State Forestry, that's the Energy, Mineral, and Natural Resource Department, EMNRD, they have their own program called Urban and Community Forestry. And so they have adopted some of these climate-ready trees concepts and really expanded on it. So one way that they've done this is this program for climate-ready demonstration sites. And I'm not sure how long this is going on, so we'll share links and more information about this. But basically, if you have, the way I see it is if you have a public space that's available and you're willing to try some of these trees, then State Forestry is growing specific trees from the climate-ready lists, and you can trial those in your yard or in a public place. So maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there, I don't know. But you can be a demonstration site for some of these species. And then you are asked to please provide input in the years following planting. But like I said a minute ago, the State Forestry also helped to expand these climate-ready tree lists beyond Albuquerque. So I wanted to show you some of that. So this is a map that has highlighted different colors for different plant hardiness zones. These are the, I think they're the 2015 USDA plant cold hardiness zones. So this is what the map might look like now or close to this. And you can see a lot of diversity. And you can see that it goes from 5A all the way to 8A. That's the different, for 5A is very cold, so that's like a Benchama, and 8A is down in Deming and Las Cruces. But using the climate models, the same that we used for the original Climate Ready Trees report for Albuquerque, when you overlay future temperatures, these are the plant hardiness zones predicted for the future in these same areas. And so a lot of them get much hotter. And so when I'm in Roswell or Farmington and talk about this program, this really strikes people from across the state. So and there's more information on the State Forestry page where you can find lists for each of these zones, these future zones. And like I said, that, you know, when I show these lists to people, we talk about how many of the trees are native. Not a lot of them are native trees. So the Native Plant Society audiences have pointed that out and are excited to put more trees on there that are native. And so the lists, like I was trying to say earlier, they're not perfect. We are really needing to use these lists with care and to really consider what we're planting and where we're planting and how we're planting it and all the things in order to be climate ready. So this is another reminder slide, but also a little promo for my tomato program. I have a tomato volunteer research program in in Los Lunas. So I will hopefully have a little bit of time to talk about that. Okay. How might you adapt this climate ready trees model to other areas? So maybe your sister lives in Colorado or you have a niece down in Florida. How might you help them to find their own climate ready trees if they don't have lists like we have for Albuquerque? So to me, there's a two-step process. You think, which city today, pick one, that has the climate that's predicted for my city in 50 or 100 years. So for Albuquerque, it's maybe El Paso or Tucson. Okay, so once you do that, then ask yourself the question, do the trees I'm considering thrive in that other city? And, you know, if they don't thrive there, you have to ask yourself why. If they're not thriving in Las Cruces or El Paso because of heat-related problems, then that's a clue that it's likely not a climate-ready tree for your environment. Now, again, we talk about these lists, but you have to be able to be flexible with them because there are a lot of other plants that are shorter lived that you can still plant, right? And when we're talking about these climate ready trees, we really want to focus on trees that are good for future generations, right? Yeah. I have a couple of my own favorites to highlight, just a few. So this one is the screwbean mesquite, and I have pictures of those beautiful screwbeans. They are really interesting and fun. And then also a tree from Truth or Consequences. And when I gave a similar talk in Las Cruces for the Native Plant Society a few years ago, they pointed out that in their experience, these screwbean mesquites are growing in riparian areas down in Las Cruces in the Mesilla Valley, Mesilla Bosque State Park. And also, it's true that I took this photo right next to the river in Tier C at one of those parks right on the river. So that's something to consider, is that we've had this problem for a long time where people are excited. I'm so happy they want to plant a tree, right? You want to encourage that. And they think they want the piñon because it's our state tree. But they're planting it up on the mesa or in Artesia. And it's just because a plant is well adapted nearby doesn't mean it's necessarily one that's good for your yard. And so screwbean might be one of those. We're trialing it here in Los Lunas, and it's doing really well. Also, a note about screwbeans, and a reason besides being beautiful that they're a favorite of mine, is that we were able to plant 3 of them in our yard in Las Cruces when I was in graduate school. And since then, there's been new tenants, new people live there, and they are not watering. And that happens, of course. So of the 40 plus trees and plants that we put in while we lived there for the fun of it, not very many of them are still surviving, but the screwbean mesquites are. The jujubes are. I don't have jujubes on this list, but they are. I should have put them in. What else is thriving? The figs. Yep. The pomegranate. Yeah. So it's not that they haven't gotten any water, of course, but it is remarkable sometimes I drive by and look over the wall to see what's still thriving there. Another one that we're excited about is pomegranate. And so it's debatable. Is it a shrub? Is it a tree? And how do you define the tree itself? But it can be grown tree-like, and it is one that is very climate adaptable for our area if it's cold hardy enough. So these that I have in this image, these are a variety that is called Afghansky, and it tends to be a more cold hardy variety. And so these did survive through the 2011 deep freeze that we had here in Los Lunas and across the state. So this is from several years ago, and now they're probably twice that tall. The orange trees in the background are some of those peaches I was bragging about with the peach blossoms. And the pomegranates are another example of plants that we may not think are as beautiful for landscapes, but when you see the color in the fall, I mean, this photo is from October 24th, 2018 here at the research farm, and the color was incredible. Just earlier that month, I was picking the fruit and enjoying fruit from it. So I also, of course, included Texas mountain laurel. This is one that is evergreen, and it is a small tree in our colder climates, but it can be much bigger. You know, in San Antonio, Texas, my aunt has one in her front yard, and it's 20 feet tall, and maybe more now. And I haven't been in a couple years, but these trees, a lot of them can be more tree-like in warmer climates, and then a smaller tree in our colder areas because of our cold winters and because of our shorter growing season. Some of that dieback happens with really intense colds, and so those tend to keep the size a little bit smaller. But Texas mountain laurel, if you don't know it, find out about it. These are the bean pods in my hand, and also those beautiful red seeds. And so it's just really a pretty plant. Also, the flower, oh my goodness, the flower on this one smells like grape soda in the spring. And I have seen really, really good looking, very large Texas mountain laurels in parking lots in Alamogordo. And you know, that's an area where they have a lot of problems that we have across the state, like with salty soil and saline water, but it's worse there. So Texas mountain laurel shines in those difficult circumstances. So another one that I did not include a picture of, but I do want to give a shout out to, is the Arizona rosewood. It's another evergreen that is more shrubby. I would say it's a tree-ish shrub, and it is thriving in hot spots all over the place, like on Rio Grande Boulevard. When you are south of I-40 and you're going on the on-ramp, they're planted there, and they just look good. Time after time, month after month, year after year, they're really thriving in extremely hot, difficult circumstances on a tilt. So I really, I'm really impressed by the Arizona rosewood. Okay, so here, what I'm trying to instill now is, as you can see, it's not all bad news. Some trees continue to thrive when they're selected and planted and watered and cared for well, like this picture of a Chinese pistache thriving in the Albuquerque planting area there in the parking lot. It's a very hot spot, and yet that tree looks great. So this is an example of how the trees, when they're, again, all the different selected and cared for properly and all those things, they can really show off. And unfortunately, we do have trees in our environment that are not thriving anymore. And so this is the comparison of the tree on the left is a tree that's on the Climate Ready Trees list, and for good reason. And the one on the right is a willow. I think it's a globe willow or Navajo willow, and it is really has a lot of dieback. It needs a lot of water. The branches fall frequently, and so I'm not saying if you have one of these trees that you have to remove it. There are beautiful ones. You know, George Duda, he's a retired forester, and he says, trees make liars out of all of us. So it's not that if you have this tree, it's going to fail, but it's something that we should not be planting in landscapes that we want the trees to be surviving to the end of the century. That's really the bottom line. So I do have some time, and I want to talk about some of these other really important things that we're not seeing. Well, I guess we are seeing people are doing wrong, and I'm getting calls. A lot of times you get a call that's somebody gives you or texts me a photo of a leaf, and when I ask, it's like I got a lot of damage on it, but it's hard to tell from a single leaf, and I ask for a zoomed out image of that tree or whatever kind of plant it is, and then you see that its planting area there's something wrong, the irrigation is wrong, and so this is my short list of concerns. So getting the Climate Ready tree selected and buying it, that's now the easy part, thankfully, for this project, but there's still more to learn. So I'm really concerned about the rooting area. So we talked a little bit about these confined planting spaces, and that really means you need to have a smaller tree at maturity. And maybe not just one tree, maybe a tree and a shrub and some grasses. We're not trying to limit that much, but when somebody says they want a huge shade tree in their courtyard, that's very difficult. I actually recommend a few smaller trees and some shade structures. Maybe you could have some vines or some of those tarps that are pretty, a pergola, things like that. So then irrigation, I should have that on its own line because we see a lot of irrigation problems. So I think I'll have time to talk about that more. But soil compaction is one that is really important. And here at the research farm, I park underneath these cottonwood trees, and I pull into the place that I park, and I think, I'm sorry, but I really want the shade, but I know that it's not good for these old trees and their roots. So soil compaction is a serious urban concern for all of our landscapes. And then staking, I call it misstaking. We see a lot of staking disasters. So if you can avoid staking, please try not to stake. And then I have bark injury here. I don't just mean, I guess injury is too broad, but so an injury that you do to the tree, my example is that before I knew that you could damage bark this way, I would squeeze a tree into the back of my little Toyota Corolla and have the window down, that kind of thing where you're damaging in a lot of ways, but roughing up the bark can cause problems. So mostly we see this with different types of maintenance, like really weed whacking too close to the trunk, that causes bark injury, and staking also is related to bark injury, or can be. So avoiding bark injury is a big one. And another big point of concern for our trees is that we see a lot of winter sun scald, and it's also called southwest injury. And so that's when on a very, very warm day, say in February, the southwest direction of the sun coming in from the southwest heats up the bark and the tissues inside, and that means that the sap starts flowing and the water starts flowing more. And depending on how low the temperatures drop that night, you could have sun scald develop, which is where those cells lyse, they break in response to that freeze. They were not protected because they were thought that it was warm enough to have a growth spurt. And you can see really horrific peeling of bark. If you're looking at a tree and you see peeling bark, first of all, it could be a lace bark elm, and so that's something to check off, that you don't have to worry about that. But if you're seeing peeling bark and you walk around the tree and notice that it is predominantly on that southwest side facing of the trunk, that's a clue that it's likely related to this winter sun scald. And it's avoidable in some different ways, and maybe we'll have time to talk about that too. Circling roots. Oh my goodness, this is a really difficult one. We see this a lot in terms of the, say you have a tree in a 5-gallon container and it's been grown in a container for a long time. When you go to plant it, you see that the roots are, the plant is root bound, we say, and the fact is that these circling roots do not self-correct over time. So over time, a circling root, maybe it's not problematic, but they can cross each other and kind of strangle each other, these roots. And so circling roots are a big problem, not in the first year, maybe not in the first 5 years after planting, but especially for older trees, we'll see that they come out of the ground and then people notice that there's like burlap around the trunk, or they hadn't been watering further out than just at the trunk. And so that meant that the roots really stayed right there and were circling. So it can happen in the nursery, and it also can happen in a planting hole, even if it wasn't circling from the nursery. And then mulch. Mulch is my favorite thing. So I love to recommend mulch. I bet you a lot of you are already on board with the mulch wagon, but I like to talk about it a lot. And then also we see so many that are buried too deep. And that's where that example I was going to give of I gave of the person that sends a picture of a leaf with damage. And I ask him to zoom out so I can see the other plants in the landscape, or if there's hardscapes like walls nearby, or recent construction, what type of landscape gravel or mulch do they have? And from those photos, sometimes you can see the base of the trunk and you can tell that the tree has been planted or buried too deep or too deeply, and that can be a slow death. I have a couple of different shout outs to give. Really, y'all know about the 505 Outside program, but they're doing such a good job with outreach and education and learning materials that I get to use in my classes all the time and share with clients all over the state. So one of the things I love so much is this Water by the Seasons irrigation guide. And so I could go into it later. I think we will be able to. But if you don't know about this, then we'll include a link to it next week. Or you can Google and find it. Water by the Seasons. So this is an infographic that helps you decide how often you need to water based on the plant type and the time of year. And then also how deep you need the water to go. And so that is really key. Another one is that I've been really enjoying is this newer irrigation efficiency guide with beautiful landscapes with less water. I printed my copy out and I have it in a little 3-ring binder. And my favorite thing about it is all these pro tips. They're like tucked away in here, these little nuggets that are so clear and just really good points. One of them is all soils need to drain between waterings to allow oxygen back into the soil pores. Roots need oxygen, so that's a big problem. Let's see if I can find another one. Yeah, a bunch of, they're it's not rocket science, but it's stuff that we don't think about a lot. Yeah, I think this is a great resource, and we'll link for this one too. Here's another of these pro tips for possible problems with your irrigation system. Grass is often taller and darker green around a sprinkler that's leaking or in the middle of a lawn where a pipe is leaking. So just kind of that forensic work and detective work of trying to figure out what's going on with your space and how to manage it better. That is a great resource. So thank you for that. I mentioned that I have a tomato program, and so I do offer a volunteering program and all kinds of events, and I've started listing them at this website. So you can go there, or you can email me at desertblooms@nmsu.edu, and I'll send send a link to this so that you can see what's coming up next. And this picture is from last summer. You can see volunteers waving there. When I was taking this picture, I had them hold their hands up for a long time so I could get it right. But last year and this year are growing tomatoes underneath solar panels and also out in full sun. This is a project that is funded by the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. And we also, in part of this project, looked at the same effects of these solar panels and the shade they provide on chili plants. That project was done in Las Cruces. So volunteers get to help with the research, maintain the plants, and then this time of year, they get to harvest. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of our plants. Over 80% of the plants have died from suspected disease, and some of them confirmed, a lot of them confirmed disease. And, if I was a tomato grower, losing 80% of your crop is not okay. But as a researcher who's studying disease and the effects that shade might have on disease occurrence and plant mortality, it's pretty exciting. So even though we only have about 40 plants, we are over 700 pounds total so far that we've harvested. And we harvest on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And we learn about all kinds of other stuff too. There's trees around and we pick fruit, and it's a good time to discuss with other interested plant people problems that you might be having. We are all the time looking into people's photos from home and what we're learning. I also want to give a shout out to Tree School at treeschoolnewmexico.com. I just chose this picture. This is a promo for a program that they offered back in February. And so if you are interested in these short courses and interactive workshops, Tree School is offering really great programs. And another one is Tree New Mexico. So Tree New Mexico is a nonprofit that it was founded in 1990. The Tree Stewards Volunteer Training Program is run through this now. And they also run the Neighborwoods program. So they're responsible for planting over 5,300 trees. They are also tracking the survival rate of those trees, 1 year, 2 year, and 3 years survivability after planting. They possibly will be expanding that to look at longer term survivability, which is really interesting data and very hard to get. They rate the overall condition of the trees they're putting in. They're very good at using the climate ready trees lists and considering climate readiness when choosing the species that they're going to have for their public plantings and for their trainings. And yeah, so the original link that I had, the QR code to find that report, is actually here under that tab that's Partners and Resources. So if you're looking for it, you can find it through the Tree New Mexico website. Yeah, there are all kinds of volunteer programs happening every Saturday and different times of the week happening in, now they've expanded to Truth or Consequences and Las Cruces and Silver City and some others. So that is a program that is doing really well and really good work. And so if you or you know somebody who is interested in volunteering, this is another great team to look into. Another one is the Land and Water Summit. So this is a local nonprofit that puts on a conference each year. It's usually in March. This is the photo that I took from their website from this past, or oh, I guess it must have been, it's 2024, so it's an older photo, but I don't think the dates are released yet for 2026. That's why I kept this in there. But if you're interested in urban development, smart development, green stormwater management, and infrastructure, this conference is excellent. And there's field trips that you learn all kinds of things and see examples in our communities of ways that people are changing how we plan our plantings. And I think they do great work. So Land and Water Summit. And of course, I can't get through a presentation without recommending the Think Trees conference. This is an urban tree care conference. Think Trees is a local nonprofit. Again, it's based in Albuquerque. I happen to be the current president, but there's a whole board and past board members of all kinds of people. And our upcoming conference is going to be the 40th. And that is very exciting. So we already have our dates set. We're selecting presenters. It's going to be really fun. You can go to thinktreesnm.org to find out more about that. And I really have a good time with this conference, and we get great feedback. So if you or somebody you know needs their continuing education units for being a certified arborist or for their New Mexico Department of Agriculture pesticide license, they can come to our conference to get those certifications renewed. And another example, this is the Ready, Set, Grow webinar gardening series. Maybe you know about it. This is a series we've had now for over 5 years, just barely over 5 years. And this is put on through New Mexico State University Extension. It's a team of myself and several of our county extension agents, and we put on a different webinar every month. Now they're once a month. The next one that's coming up is going to be September 17th. That's a Wednesday at 3 p.m. It's Conserving New Mexico Monarchs with Caitlin Haase. And she is a really great presenter, and she's working with the Xerces Society. So we're excited to have her. And we also give presentations on trees a lot in this series. So each of the webinars is recorded if you can't attend live or if you want to watch it again. We try to have a good discussion with questions from the public. And so I hope that you or somebody you know might be interested in this this webinar series. So they're all recorded. If you go to that website and scroll down, you can see them back through until August 2020. Okay, and with that, thank you very much.